It begins subtly, almost imperceptibly. One morning you wake up and the world feels different, not because it changed, but because you did. The coffee tastes the same. The sunlight breaks through the blinds just as it always has. The voices around you still speak the same way, and the streets hum with their usual rhythm. And yet, something inside of you knows. A quiet truth begins to whisper, "This isn't it." That's the moment of awakening, not fireworks, not lightning bolts from the sky, but a deep internal tremor that shifts how you see everything. Owen Hermstring calls this the internal break of the outer trance. In his words, the true awakening is not seeing something new, it's seeing what was always there, that without the fog. In that moment, you don't become more, at least not yet. You become empty, emptied of certainty, emptied of illusions, emptied of the stories you believed were yours but never truly fit. It's disorienting, because you're not quite asleep, but not fully awake. You're in a space where things that once made sense now feel constructed. Conversations feel robotic. Goals once chased feel hollow. And perhaps most startling of all is this awareness that the people closest to you don't seem to notice what's happening inside you. Hermstring suggests this dissonance is natural and even necessary. The veil lifts for the soul, not for the room, he writes. You awaken alone because you're meant to see before you speak. In other words, the universe doesn't give you this clarity to convert others. It gives it to you to stabilize yourself in the midst of a system still running on autopilot. And that's hard, because instinctively we want to explain what we're feeling. We want to say, "Don't you see it too?" But we quickly learn that trying to explain an awakening to someone still inside the dream often sounds like madness. So instead, you begin to observe. Not from judgment, but from a growing sense of quiet detachment. You see the routines people follow, the scripts they live by, the triggers they carry. You recognize the energy of fear disguised as ambition, the cycles of lack hiding beneath superficial abundance. The longing for connection buried under layers of digital noise and social rituals. Hermstring refers to this phase as the slow grief of clarity. You start to grieve, not because you've lost something, but because you now realize what was never real to begin with. That grief isn't about people or places. It's about layers of yourself that no longer feel true. But there's a gift hidden in the discomfort. Hermstring explains that every awakening carries with it a core frequency code, a kind of energetic signature that begins to rewrite how your subconscious interacts with the world. What you used to tolerate, you can't anymore. What you once ignored now feels unbearable. And what you quietly wished for, peace, purpose, depth, suddenly becomes non-negotiable. It's not that you become someone new, you become someone more honest. At first, this honesty can feel like isolation. Your relationships may feel strained, conversations may dry up, the things that used to excite you feel dull. But that space, Hermstring says, is sacred. It's in the desert of disconnection that the blueprint of your true self is drawn. This desert isn't punishment, it's preparation. Because when the veil lifts, your life doesn't instantly transform. You do. And the world takes time to catch up. This is the most fragile part of awakening. Many retreat. Many question themselves. Many numb the insight with busyness or spiritual performance. But those who endure this phase begin to notice subtle magic. Synchronicities appear. Books, strangers, moments that feel impossibly aligned. Your intuition sharpens. Silence becomes sacred. You start to feel less pulled to react and more drawn to reflect. You realize the goal was never to wake others. It was to fully wake yourself. And from that place, you begin to navigate the world not as someone needing to be understood, but as someone willing to understand. That's the shift. Not an escape from the world, but an entry into it with new eyes. Not a crusade to fix others, but a quiet revolution of perception. Hermstring concludes this phase with a line that echoes long after the page. You didn't wake up to shout, you woke up to listen, to the truth that was always waiting inside you. And so the awakening continues, not as a moment, but as a path where you walk among the sleeping, not with pride or pity, but with the gentle awareness that you too once dreamed with your eyes open. And now, you're beginning to see. After the initial awakening, something unexpected happens. You begin to feel alone. Not the kind of loneliness that comes from being physically isolated, but a deeper kind, spiritual isolation. It's the realization that those around you, the people you've loved, worked with, laughed with, maybe even suffered with, are still asleep, still operating under the same illusions you've just shed. And when you try to share what's happening inside you, their responses range from confusion to skepticism, sometimes even mockery. That's when the weight of awakening begins to settle on your shoulders. Not because the truth is heavy, but because carrying it in a world that can't see it, yet often is. Owen Hermstring writes, "Revelation isolates before it elevates." That phrase encapsulates what many people experience in the early stages of spiritual or energetic awakening. Once your perception shifts, you're no longer aligned with the same vibrational frequency of those around you. And that shift, while subtle on the outside, is deeply disruptive internally. You start to see through the words people say, through the motivations behind their actions, through the emotional patterns that once went unnoticed. And this clarity is not always a blessing. It can feel like a burden. You begin to ask yourself, why can't they see it too? Why do they keep repeating the same cycles? Why do they chase validation, drown in distractions, avoid silence like it's dangerous? And perhaps more painfully, why do they look at you like you're the one who's lost your way? Hermstring explains this disconnection not as arrogance but as alignment. He says, when your energy recalibrates to truth, the noise of the world will sound foreign. What you're feeling isn't rejection. It's resonance fading. You're simply no longer vibrating at the same frequency, and that divergence is felt most in relationships. This can lead to profound disillusionment. You may feel misunderstood or even betrayed. Friends who once felt like soulmates now feel distant. Conversations that used to energize you now drain you. Small talk becomes unbearable. Social rituals feel hollow. And in moments of desperation, you may consider returning to the old version of yourself, just to feel included again. But here lies a spiritual test, as Hermstring warns. If you dim your light to match their darkness, you'll forget you ever saw the sun. The challenge isn't to go back, it's to go deeper, to hold your vibration even when you're the only one holding it. This isolation has a purpose. It's not punishment, it's purification. When you no longer rely on external validation, you're forced to find your inner anchor. You start to trust your intuition more. You notice how the universe communicates in symbols, patterns, and synchronicities, and you begin to discover that the silence isn't empty. It's full of presence. In this sacred isolation, you meet yourself. Without the mirrors of others to reflect who you think you are, you begin to see who you truly are. Your fears, your truths, your wounds, and your wisdom, everything becomes clearer. Hermstring likens this stage to the caterpillar's time inside the chrysalis. He writes, "Transformation demands solitude. The old form must dissolve before the new one can fly. You are dissolving, not into nothingness but into authenticity. You are shedding beliefs that were never yours, roles that were too small, and expectations that suffocated your truth. And that process is messy. It's uncomfortable. But it's also sacred. Eventually a shift occurs. You stop expecting others to understand. You stop needing them to. And in that surrender, peace begins to grow. You find comfort in your own company. You discover joy in simplicity. You attract new people, those who speak the language of energy, those who understand without words. And more importantly, you become someone others quietly watch, even if they don't yet understand why. Hermstring puts it this way, when you walk in truth, even the sleeping feel your footsteps. So the question is no longer, why don't they see it? The question becomes, can I stay true even when they don't? Because that is the real work of awakening. Not to convince the world, but to become so rooted in truth that your presence becomes a silent invitation. One day, someone may come to you and say, I don't know why, but something about you feels different, and that's the door opening. That's your frequency reaching theirs. That's what Hermstring calls the quiet ripple of aligned energy. No preaching, no proving, just presence. And until then, walk the path with grace. Trust the solitude. Embrace the sacred silence. Because the ones who awaken first are not chosen to be louder. They are chosen to hold the light when others can't see. And when the time is right, your light will become a lighthouse. Not to show others the way, but to remind them that they can find their own. One of the most painful and confusing parts of spiritual growth is not the transformation itself, but the resistance it triggers in others. You begin to notice that certain people in your life are no longer comfortable around you. They avoid eye contact. They change the subject when you speak about deeper truths. Some might even mock you, gaslight your clarity, or subtly try to pull you back into old habits. You wonder why they can't just be happy for your progress, why they seem threatened by your peace. But Owen Hermstring offers a profound explanation. Your alignment exposes their avoidance. What you're witnessing is energetic dissonance. It's not personal, it's vibrational. As you rise in awareness, your frequency becomes a mirror that reflects back to others all the ways in which they are still asleep. You don't even have to say anything. Your presence alone becomes a disruption to their comfort zone. And in response, many will reject you, resist you, or resent you. Not because you've done something wrong, but because you've stopped playing the role they once needed you to play in their narrative. Hermstring explains that we are all vibrational beings interacting in a web of resonance. When you are operating from your lower self, living out patterns of fear, lack, guilt, or shame, you aligned effortlessly with others who were in similar states. There was no friction, no discomfort, just shared numbness. But the moment you began awakening, your energy started to shift, and what was once familiar began to feel foreign, not only to you, but to them. This dissonance often first appears in family dynamics. You might become the black sheep, the one who no longer engages in drama, who questions generational beliefs, who chooses solitude over obligation. You may be called selfish, cold, even arrogant, but Hermstring reminds us that growth is perceived as rebellion by those committed to stagnation. They're not really angry at you. They're angry at the mirror your growth has become, because it silently asks them a question they're not ready to answer. Why haven't you changed? Friendships can begin to crack as well. Conversations that once flowed now feel forced. You begin to notice how much of your connection was rooted in complaining, gossip, or shared trauma. And when you stop participating in that frequency, the friendship begins to dissolve. This can feel like loss, but it's really alignment. As Hermstring puts it, the universe will not allow you to anchor new energy to old containers. You cannot carry everyone with you, and you were never meant to. Even in romantic relationships, your awakening can feel like a threat. You might begin to outgrow a connection that once felt sacred, not because you stopped loving them, but because love is no longer enough when the frequencies are misaligned. One partner evolves, while the other remains attached to control, blame, or ego. And in that dissonance, the relationship either transforms or collapses. And that collapse is not failure, it's truth revealing itself. Hermstring writes, "Your soul will choose honesty over harmony every time, but here's what's critical. Do not shrink yourself to maintain connection. Do not dull your light to ease their discomfort. Do not betray your truth just to be accepted, because every time you do, you're sending a signal to the universe that you are not ready to fully embody your higher self. The path of awakening is not about people-pleasing, it's about frequency fidelity, holding your vibration even when it costs you comfort, approval, or familiarity. The people who resist you now are not your enemies. They are simply not meant to go where you're going, at least not yet. Hermstring calls them temporal reflections, souls who mirrored who you were, not who you are becoming. And the most loving thing you can do is release them with grace. Let them go without resentment, because your energy is sacred, and anything that asks you to compromise your evolution is not love. It's attachment disguised as loyalty. Eventually, you will begin to attract your soul resonance, people who speak your frequency, who don't flinch at your truth, who expand in your presence instead of shrinking, and those connections will feel effortless, nourishing, alive. You won't have to explain your vibration, they'll feel it. You won't have to defend your path, they'll be walking beside you on their own. But first, the dissonant ones must fall away, not as punishment, but as preparation. In closing, remember Hermstring's words. Every time you choose your truth over their approval, you claim your freedom. And freedom always comes with a price, but the cost of staying asleep is far greater than the pain of awakening. Hold your light, even when it burns bridges, even when it breaks bonds, because the universe will never let go of you for choosing truth, but people might, and that's okay. There's a part of awakening no one prepares you for. It's not the excitement of clarity, nor the thrill of breakthroughs. It's the silence, the space where you find yourself standing alone, no longer belonging to the world you left and not yet fully received by the one you're walking into. Owen Hermstring refers to this as the sacred void, a period where everything old falls away before the new is ready to arrive. And in that space, you are left with a quiet that can feel like isolation, even abandonment. But here's the truth, that loneliness is not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's proof that you've chosen truth over belonging. Hermstring teaches that human beings are conditioned to crave attachment. From childhood, we are wired to associate connection with safety. We're taught to mold ourselves to the expectations of others, parents, peers, teachers, partners. We sacrifice authenticity in exchange for acceptance. We become mirrors, not beings. But when you begin to awaken, that mirror cracks. You stop reflecting what others want to see. And instead, you start radiating what your soul truly is. And that, for many, becomes intolerable. The people who once felt like home begin to feel foreign. The conversations that once filled your day now sound like noise. The distractions that used to numb your pain lose their power. You try to go back, but it doesn't fit. You try to explain, but they don't understand. You begin to wonder if you're broken, if you're just too much now. But Hermstring reminds us, you are not too much. You are just no longer compatible with the illusion. What you're experiencing is energetic detachment. As you shift into higher frequencies, truth, presence, responsibility, compassion, you begin to vibrate out of alignment with environments built on lower ones: blame, drama, control, escapism. And the more aligned you become, the less tolerant you are of what once felt normal. That isn't ego, that's evolution. Your soul is not interested in comfort, it's interested in coherence. But evolution is lonely, at first, because few are ready to meet themselves deeply. Few are willing to release identities built on survival. So when you choose to awaken, you're not just walking away from others, you're walking toward your truest self. And in that journey, there is a shedding. Hermstring writes, "Before your life expands, it must contract, not as punishment, but as purification." This contraction feels like loneliness, but it's not emptiness, it's sacred space. Space being cleared for soul-aligned people, opportunities and paths. And yes, it hurts, because loneliness is not just the absence of others, it's the grieving of who you used to be. The version of you that tolerated less, that avoided truth, that was satisfied with surface-level connections. You miss that version, not because it was healthy, but because it was familiar. And humans confuse familiarity with safety. But Hermstring warns us, if comfort becomes your compass, you will abandon your calling. So the void remains, until you're ready to fill it with something real. Here's what no one says: the loneliness won't last. It's a bridge, not a destination. But the only way across is through, and that means learning to sit in your own energy without distraction. To face the fears, the doubts, the old wounds that arise when silence replaces noise. It means finding home in yourself, not in others' validation. Because once you become whole alone, you'll stop seeking others to fill your fractures. And when you reach that point, when solitude becomes sacred, not scary, everything begins to shift. You attract from alignment, not need. You speak with clarity, not defense. You offer love without attachment. You begin to connect with people who meet you where you are, not where you were. Relationships built not on obligation, but on resonance. No masks, no manipulation, just soul recognition. And those connections, they feel like remembering, not discovering, because they were waiting for the real you all along. So if you're walking through this season of solitude, don't rush it, don't numb it, don't fill it with noise. Let it work on you. Let it strip away the false. Let it fortify your truth. Hermstring says, the void is not your enemy. It's your womb, a sacred chamber where your next self is being born. And yes, birth is painful, but it's also holy. In the end, loneliness at higher frequencies is a rite of passage, a sign that you are no longer available for half-truths, half-loves, half-living. And the people meant for your next chapter? They will not be found in the crowd you left behind. They will meet you in the silence, in the stillness, in the frequency of truth. Until then, hold yourself, because in this lonely space between who you were and who you are becoming, you are never truly alone. Not when your soul is finally leading the way, Most of us were raised on a single belief. That effort equals reward. Push harder, stay longer, do more, and success will be yours. But what if that very effort is the reason it's slipping further away? Owen Hermstring confronts this cultural myth with an uncomfortable truth. When you're operating outside your true alignment, no amount of effort will move you forward. It might feel like motion, but it's not progress. Because trying harder is not the same as becoming more aligned. Hermstring explains that the energy behind the action matters more than the action itself. If you're chasing something out of fear, desperation, or lack, the universe reads the frequency of that intention, not the amount of effort you put in. He writes, "The law does not respond to your sweat, it responds to your state." In other words, it's not about doing more, it's about becoming more. Many people, when they begin a journey of conscious manifestation, start from a wounded space. They want to change their life, yes, but they do it from a place of urgency. I need this now. I must fix this. I can't wait. They don't realize that this urgency is a signal of misalignment. It's not the voice of the soul. It's the panic of the ego. And what happens when you try to manifest from panic? You repel, not because you're unworthy, but because panic is the opposite of trust. And manifestation at its core is an act of trust. This is what Hermstring calls the law of reversal, the idea that sometimes the more you chase, the more you push away. It's not punishment, it's physics. You can't pull in abundance while vibrating in scarcity. You can't attract peace while radiating resistance. You can't reach the mountaintop by digging the valley deeper with your bare hands. But here's where it gets subtle. Most people don't realize they're resisting. Because resistance isn't just saying no. Resistance can sound like I'm trying my best. It can look like calendars filled with tasks. It can feel like burnout dressed up as dedication. But the universe doesn't reward you for being exhausted. It responds to coherence, when your beliefs, emotions, and actions are aligned. Hermstring offers a radical shift. Instead of efforting your way toward your desires, you must align yourself into resonance with them. Let's say you want love. Trying harder might mean downloading more dating apps, forcing conversations, overthinking texts, but aligned resonance. That begins with becoming someone who already feels worthy of love, safe in solitude, and open to authentic connection. And from that place of inner fullness, love doesn't have to be chased. It arrives. The same is true for money, success, purpose. Hermstring says, you do not earn your desires. You remember them, you match them, you allow them. This is not about passivity. It's about potency. You don't stop taking action. You take action from the right frequency, from clarity, from wholeness, from trust. And here's the paradox. When you truly shift into alignment, the external results often show up faster, not because you forced them, but because you stopped blocking them. So why is this so hard for people to accept? Because we've been conditioned to believe that suffering is noble, that struggle proves worth. That if you're not exhausted, you're not trying hard enough. But that's a script written by systems that profit from your burnout. The universe? It has no such rules. It rewards truth, not torture. Hermstring compares this to tuning a radio. You don't get the station you want by twisting the knob harder. You get it by finding the right frequency. The same applies to your life. If what you want isn't showing up, the answer isn't to push, it's to pause. Ask yourself, what part of me is out of tune? This doesn't mean you stop moving. It means your movement is sacred, not rushed, not anxious, but intentional, inspired, flowing. Effortlessness doesn't mean ease all the time, but it does mean alignment. The kind where even when you're challenged, you're not drained, you're alive, because your energy is moving in the same direction as your purpose. So if you've been trying harder and getting nowhere, stop. Not because you're giving up, but because you're waking up. Stop and realign, stop and listen, stop and remember. You are not here to force your life into shape. You are here to become the version of you who naturally lives that life. Because when you do, you'll realize the less you chase, the more you attract. The less you force, the more you receive. And the less you try, the more you become. There comes a moment in every awakening when the loneliness hits. Not because you're isolated, but because you can now see. And most of the people around you still can't. This isn't superiority, it's separation. It's the aching distance between perception and awareness, between what is obvious to you now and what remains invisible to others. Owen Hermstring calls this moment the awakening divide. It's when the veil lifts for one person, while everyone else continues to live inside the illusion, and you begin to feel the weight of a truth that no one around you recognizes. You're no longer speaking the same language. And worse, you realize that trying to explain it often makes it worse. Hermstring writes, "The moment you awaken, you lose the right to blame, but you also lose the ability to belong, at least temporarily. That's the cost. Awareness strips away comfort. It demands accountability. It shows you patterns you once thought were just bad luck. It reveals energy dynamics behind relationships, jobs, habits. Suddenly, things you used to tolerate become unbearable. And that shift, while liberating, can also be profoundly isolating. You may look around and wonder, why are they still chasing what I know won't fulfill them? Why are they still afraid of what I've already healed? Why do they still believe that suffering is necessary, that love must be earned, that safety must be controlled? But you can't pull someone out of sleep with a scream. You can't force awakening. As Hermstring says, awareness is a door that opens from the inside. You may knock, but you may not enter. So what do you do when you see what others can't? You grieve. You grieve the version of you who used to fit in. You grieve the friendships that once made sense. You grieve the innocence of not knowing. But most of all, you grieve the connection you once felt to a world that now feels hollow. This is sacred grief. It is not weakness. It is expansion. You are shedding the identity that depended on external validation. You're stepping into a space where truth matters more than approval. And that hurts, because humans are wired for belonging. We want to be seen, understood, embraced. But now the price of belonging to the crowd is the betrayal of your soul. And so, you choose. Not between right and wrong, but between comfort and alignment. Many people, Hermstring explains, attempt to go back. They dim their light. They pretend not to know. They numb their awareness to feel close to others again. But this only creates deeper dissonance, because once you know, you can't unknow. Once your soul has tasted truth, it will not be satisfied with pretense. What's the way forward? Hermstring offers this. Don't retreat from the world, but don't expect it to meet you where you are. Hold your frequency. Live as an example. Radiate. Don't preach. Embody. Don't convince. People don't awaken through argument. They awaken through resonance. The more you live in alignment, the more you become a mirror for others. Not by force, but by presence. And slowly others who are ready will find you. A new tribe will emerge, one not based on shared history or social roles, but on shared frequency. This is your soul family, the ones who don't need you to shrink in order to feel comfortable, the ones who see your truth and say, me too, but until then, hold steady. You are not crazy for seeing differently. You are not arrogant for choosing peace over performance. You are not broken for craving depth in a shallow world. You are simply awake in a place where most are still dreaming. And yes, that can feel lonely. But as Hermstring reminds us, the higher you rise in consciousness, the smaller the crowd becomes, but the deeper the love flows. This is not a punishment. It's a refinement. You're being calibrated to a new reality, one where truth is enough, where presence is power, where belonging doesn't come from fitting in, but from standing out in authenticity. So if today you feel the pain of that divide, breathe. You're not alone, you're just ahead. There's a moment at the end of all striving when you finally let go, not out of defeat, not out of apathy, but because something within you finally understands, control was never the source of your power. Surrender is. In The Law Behind the Laws, Owen Hermstring calls this moment the final unlock. He writes, "True creation begins not when the mind commands, but when the soul allows." That sounds poetic, even cryptic, until you live it. Until every method, every visualization, every act of willpower leads you to the same wall, and then one quiet day, when you stop pushing, the wall dissolves. This is not about giving up. It's about giving over. Giving over your mind to something deeper than thought. Giving over your plans to a wisdom that sees what you cannot. Giving over your fear to the possibility that something greater is organizing the chaos. Surrender in this sense is not passive. It is not weakness. It is not the absence of action, it is the alignment of action with flow. It is the refusal to force what doesn't align, the discipline to follow inner guidance even when logic screams otherwise, and the faith to trust in timing that isn't yours to control. The final unlock is not a moment of grandeur. It's quiet, unremarkable. It's the day you stop begging the universe to move and instead allow yourself to be moved. It's the breath you take when you realize you're safe even in uncertainty. It's the silence after the storm where for the first time you hear your soul whisper clearly, "Now." Hermstring explains that this level of surrender can only happen after the illusion of personal supremacy is shattered. You must first believe that you can manifest everything by thinking hard enough. You must first believe that your mind alone can rewrite reality. And when that belief breaks, when all your strategies begin to fail, that's when surrender becomes available. It's not a technique, it's a threshold, and what waits on the other side of that threshold is not emptiness, it's creation. Because when you surrender, you become a vessel, not a puppet, not a passive observer, but an active collaborator with something higher. Hermstring calls this the divine flow field, the energetic reality beneath all appearances that responds not to command, but to coherence. You don't demand from this field, you harmonize with it, and that harmony begins with surrender. So what does surrender look like in real life? It looks like releasing the job that drains your spirit, even if the world calls it secure. It looks like choosing rest when hustle feels safer. It looks like praying not for a specific outcome, but for alignment with what's best for you. Even if you don't yet know what that is, it looks like saying, "I don't know what's next, but I trust that the next step will appear when I need it." That's not laziness, that's courage, because the ego clings to control. The ego wants guarantees, the ego needs visibility, but the soul operates on a deeper current. It feels its way forward. It follows resonance. It listens more than it speaks, and when you live from that place and that surrendered, soul-aligned place, everything changes. Ideas come not as effort, but as insight. Opportunities don't need to be chased, they find you. People enter your life who mirror your truth, not your trauma. And success no longer feels like a prize you earn through suffering, but a natural consequence of your presence. This is what Hermstring means when he says, "The most powerful creators are not the loudest. They are the most surrendered, because surrender grants access to a frequency where outcomes are shaped before they are seen, where energy moves before matter does, where the invisible becomes more real than the visible. In this space, you're not trying to make things happen, you're letting them. You still act, you still choose, but your choices are no longer driven by fear. They're guided by alignment. You no longer grasp, you receive. You no longer manipulate, you trust. And that trust, that is the highest vibration you can emit. Because the universe doesn't respond to desperation, it responds to certainty. And nothing says, "I am certain," more powerfully than surrender. So if you've been trying and pushing and manifesting and nothing is moving, pause. Maybe it's not about trying harder. Maybe it's about opening deeper. Maybe the breakthrough isn't on the other side of more effort. Maybe it's on the other side of letting go.